Hello, hello, hello again. Welcome to another episode of Meet the Experts, the anti podcast, where we talk to small business owners, thought leaders, experts in their field, and we give them just a good free platform to tell everyone about themselves, their business, their products and services, who they help, why they help them, and a little bit more about them, the people behind these different businesses. We are in our between 70 and 80 as far as numbers of episodes. It gets foggy. I have to go back and look. I think this is episode 75. But so much fun. And if you stick around to the end of today's episode, I promise you, at the end of the episode, I will tell you how you too can be a guest on Meet the Experts. But you got to stick around and watch the whole episode. It's great. It's going to be great. And this episode is brought to you by Journey Builder, which is a world-class customer relationship management software, CRM, but it's so much more than that. It is like 50 marketing tools all in one under one roof. So if you've been looking at ways to rein in all the different software you're using for your email, your website, your all the different, marketing features you do, and manage customers and booking calendars and things like that all under one roof, let's talk. Stick around to the end of the episode. You can always send me a message and I'll be happy to talk to you about Journey Builder. So with that being said, let's talk about today's episode. I've got a great guest. I'm really excited to kind of sponge off of his knowledge. Steve Kilberg, very smart guy who I've gotten the chance to briefly get to know for a minute. Steve is an M&A advisor. That's mergers and acquisitions for those who don't come from that world. I don't come from that world, so that's why it's even more fascinating to me. But he is an advisor, an M&A advisor for digital businesses that do less than $10 million a year in revenue. He's going to tell us all about what that looks like, who he helps, and a whole lot more. So I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's get Steve up here. Steve, how are you, my friend?
Jay, thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with you and hopefully share some nuggets for your listeners so they can grow their digital business.
That sounds fantastic. I have got a wide range of people who will ultimately watch this. Some digital, some not. But I think what you're about to talk about, I think still the nuggets that I'm confident you'll drop could really help a lot of people that are in business and maybe looking for like what's next or how to grow. So before we get too much into products and services, just take a minute and talk about who you are and a little bit more about what you do on an overview level.
Yeah, so the quick high level is I've been in the internet space for just many years. I'm afraid to admit how long. But the latest I'm doing now is on the mergers and acquisitions of digital businesses. And how I got to this was I had built an e-commerce business myself from an idea at dinner one night. My wife and I were having, dinner like a lot of couples will do. And we had this idea, what if we grew this business to do this? And so we did it. It was not a straight line, I will tell you that, as any entrepreneur will know. But we grew it to seven figures, and then kind of we're going along, and we were going to sell it. I thought, okay, we're going to sell this thing. It's not going to be a home run, but we're going to make some money. It'll be a great experience. And I decided not to. Over another dinner in Mexico, we were having this. I said, but if I do this and this, we could double or triple this thing. And so I put my foot down, and then some things, things happened. And then this thing called COVID happened. And that changed everything. So then our business took a gigantic blow. And I won't go into the details around that, but we're in the process of building that back up. But in lieu of that, because I wanted to sell it, I wanted to understand some of the details around that M&A side, and linked up with a colleague of mine. And that's where I've been spending most of my time for the last year and a half, and just absolutely loving it, because I get to see behind the scenes of all these digital businesses, as you described, that are doing less than 10 million a year. And we're helping them sell these assets. And I'm seeing a lot of mistakes they're making, mistakes I made as well. And it's really sad because they want the most amount of money at the very end. And so they're not doing some fundamental things to grow their revenue to them that it could get to, and their profit, of course. And so they leave money on the table. Now we're still able to sell these assets, but now that I'm on that side, because with dealing with these businesses, I see the financials, I see the entire business model, and I'm a digital guy. So I know enough how things will work. It doesn't matter the industry or the niche, because we'll deal with e-commerce, SaaS, affiliate websites, app businesses, anything that's digital. we're dealing with. And so it's been fascinating to experience this. And this is why I want to share this with your listeners, because there are nuggets that are relative to obviously digital businesses, but even brick and mortar can take away some of these lessons and help to grow their asset. Because at the end of the day, you should be trying to grow this, because here's what's going to happen. A life event might happen, whether it's COVID or something else in their life 3 years from now, 5 years from now. And why they may be sitting here listening to you saying, I'm not looking to sell my business. Your life will change in the next 3 to 5 years. And so you might want to put your business in position to sell for the most amount. And that's why you want to start doing some things different today. Because I can guarantee you, every business owner I've talked with, there's holes that there's in their business and there's leaving money. And so it's revenue and profit is slipping through their fingers. And it's sad, because I want them to succeed, and I want to succeed as well.
It's so interesting, and it's funny. I was gonna follow up and say, hey, give me the examples of what digital businesses are, because sometimes people may not understand the difference of a digital business versus a physical business, right? I mean, you might or really just not know exactly what that means. But I like how you said e-commerce, SaaS, apps, those types of businesses. All right, so let's say somebody might be interested in working with you. Let's talk a little bit about products and services you offer. How does somebody work with you, or how do you work with your clients?
Thanks for asking. So really, I've got a program I put together called the GPS Blueprint. And what that stands for, it's a 3-step process. And of course, there's many layers underneath each one of those pillars. But the first thing is, if their business is up and running, we have to look at the data that they have access to. So we gather data. That's what the G stands for. I'm going to dig deep into reviewing your numbers. There's a whole details underneath this, like what does it cost you to acquire a customer? What is your average transaction value? What is your lifetime value? What is your cost per lead? All these numbers that I just listed out. Sadly, a lot of businesses don't know those numbers, and they should know them. At the time when I ask those questions, you should rattle those off. And sadly, most business owners don't. And the reason that's important is, if you know those numbers, you then can adjust some of the activities and decisions you're making today, because you're going to be hyper focused on growing those numbers, or doing the things that'll get you to acquire customers the least amount possible, and growing your average cart value and growing your lifetime value. And if you know those things, I guarantee you, well, you won't look at your business the same way as you have in the past. But sadly, a lot of people don't know this. There's a few other things underneath that, like who are you selling to? What does your ideal prospect or customer look like? And I mean a lot of layers deep. So with our e-commerce business, just to give an example, is we knew that we were selling fitness accessories. So we knew that our buyer was a 48-year-old female who lived outside San Antonio, Texas, was married, college educated, worked in the medical field. More specifically, she was a nurse. She had a child. She drove an SUV. She owned an iPhone, and I could keep going. Now that blows a lot of people away. Like, how did you know that? Well, we looked at a lot of data that was available right at our fingertips. And that's the other thing I find out when I talk to people, is they have no idea these psychographic elements that make up their ideal customer. Because the reason that's important is, if I know those things, I can then communicate them in my marketing efforts on how I can solve their challenges that they're dealing with, and does my product fit into that? And if it does, I increase my chance of getting a sale, which then relates to more revenue and more profit. There's a whole bunch of other details underneath that. But once I go through the data, we gather the data. Now we come up with a plan. We make adjustments to seeing, okay, where are we missing out on some of these key things? That's the P part of the GPS program. And we start making some different modifications. And then once we know those, we have a new plan, we start to scale the business. And then we put the business in a better position to sell 6 months, 12 months, 18, 24 months down the road, or at least you're now in a much better position, because I can guarantee you'll start to grow your revenue. It is shocking to me, the businesses that I work with. And I'm working with a client right now in the skincare space. I'm not a skincare expert. I don't need to be. We've made 2 small changes in the last less than a month. It's only been 3 weeks. We've already increased her revenue by 18%. I looked at the numbers last night. I don't know the profit yet, but that just right there alone, 2 small changes. And it's just, those are the things that when I'm working in the business, I'll come in and take a look at, because I'm getting that fresh set of eyes, and I know exactly what to look for.
Well, you nailed it. I mean, as a marketing agency owner, obviously, which I've been for 11 years, one of the things that before we work with clients is kind of, we come in as a fractional CMO, right? So we're coming in solely on the marketing side, nothing. We don't want to really know much about the financials, except for, cost per lead, acquisition cost, those things. But we we start out with every client as doing the customer avatar. Let's identify who your target audience is, and let's go as deep as we can into that. I don't want to know just the demographics. I like you said, I want to get down to what's going to make them buy. What are their fears and frustrations? What are their wants and aspirations, right? What is the transformation that you're selling them look like, right? The before state to the after state. Because you've probably heard the same saying that people don't buy products and services, people buy transformations, right? And we talk about that. So when you talked about that, I was just, like, my ears just like perked up, because I was like, yes, you're hitting it, you're right on the money. Every business needs to know their avatar. They need to know who they're selling to. It's kind of like the first spot, and then you can build your plan of attack, right, to turn them from stranger to raving fan. So I'm so glad that you said that, and you can come in and advise people on all of that in terms of how are we going to get more revenue for the business, more profit, and make it worth more money, right? So I think that's really powerful, very, very powerful. Now, Steve, you've been in business a long time. Obviously and inevitably, you've had to have a few people say some nice words about you. Is there any like customer win or testimonial that if I ask you that question, it just comes to mind as far as something somebody said or something you've heard over and over again from people that you've worked with?
Yeah, I think it goes back to just having that fresh set of eyes. And I have the experience. I tell people, look, I've been in your shoes. I'm just farther down the road, and I made a lot of mistakes. So I'm here to guide you and advise you on not making those same mistakes. And going back to the avatar, I'm so glad I figured that would resonate with you, Jay, because of your background and what you guys do. And it's very common, as you see, I see the same thing. And when I ask people, like, what is your customer avatar? Well, who's your ideal customer? They'll say women over 40. Well, that's too broad, right? You have to get very granular. Now, you will eventually get those people. Like I said, our buyer was a 48-year-old female. Yes, we sold to 40-year-old females. We also sold to 50-year-olds, 55-year-olds, and we also sold to males, but predominantly that was our ideal customer. And it's just shocking how many businesses don't know the answer to those questions, especially the psychographic information. And there are so many ways to gather that data. I can guarantee your listeners right now, they already have it in their fingertips. They just don't know where to look. That's the other thing I've learned, is that they don't know where to look. And so back to your question, that's the thing that people have told me, is I help them look at things that they didn't realize, or find data points, if you will. They had no idea where to look. And it's just, but again, it's overwhelming. We have a lot of stuff that we're dealing with in our day-to-day lives, yet running the business, et cetera. But they're so overwhelmed, they don't even know where to look. And once I point some of those things out, it gives them that new perspective. It's like, I look at it as, I'm holding a glass up for, if people can see this video, but I'm just like turning it a little bit to give you a different perspective. And you can see now, oh, I didn't see that particular angle. And that lets you look at your business from a different perspective.
I love that. And I love that simple analogy of just showing something. So it's got to feel good when people are like, wow, you've really given me a new way to look at my business, or a fresh set of eyes. I think that's probably a really great compliment to hear. Absolutely. The next thing that we always like to find out with all of our guests, and I don't know if we all like to find this out from all of our guests. I love this. This is my favorite question that I ask. It's called Learned It, Earned It, Improved Your Authority. So I have found a very common theme among entrepreneurs as far as how they got to this point in life. And it resonates with me because it's pretty much my journey as well. But if I ask you, Steve, how you earned it, learned it, or proved your authority, do you have what was your journey to this point from an educational standpoint? Is it titles and certifications, schooling? What did it take to get to where you're at now?
Boy, a lot of trial and error. And then the other thing, if I had to surmise it, what really helped to give me some great big leaps was basically hiring a mentor or joining a mastermind. And I was very resistant to that at first, because my attitude was, well, I'm smart enough, I'll figure this out. And I would try and fail and try and fail. And it's frustrating, because you're like, I think I'm doing the right stuff, but I'm missing something. And why is this happening? Why is this taking so long? And so then when I would join a mastermind or get a coach, they would just point some small things out, like going back to my analogy. They're like, you just need to turn and look at things this way, and you're going to be blown away. And then you would experience that. So a good example is, I had a mentor of mine early on. I was doing some things with our e-commerce business, and he gave me some tips. He said, do this and this. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's going to work, but I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to trust you. And lo and behold, it was right. He was spot on right. And his comment to me was, A lot of times that very small hinges will open big doors. You were just looking, you were trying to walk through the wall, and I just showed you where the door was at, and you just happened
Mm,
to turn the doorknob then, and then my world changed. Because once then I experienced that in terms of like listening to this and then trying some things and then using the frameworks that he taught me, it changed everything. And so then I kept making those big steps. It's literally like climbing a mountain. You've heard that analogy. Like you get
mm,
around that big boulder, and all of a sudden now you see a clear path, but you still got a few more battles to, or things to get up and over. And there's never an end, unfortunately,
right.
especially with any business. But you do get farther down the road, and that's what I tell people now is like, if I'm coaching or working with them, saying I'm just going to help you get there faster. If you're already up and running, you're generating revenue. You're smart enough, and you're passionate enough, and you're determined enough to get so far. But I'm going to get you there faster because you that's what you're paying for, is speed at that point in time. And that's the thing that I'm happy with, it when I can point those things out to businesses and they can make those leaps and bounds so they don't waste time. And time is the most valuable asset that we all have that we're losing every day.
I was talking to someone the other day just about time, and he said, Jay, what would, if you were to give me your hourly rate, what would you say? And I said $250 an hour, right? I just threw out a number, right? Probably should charge 4 times that, but I said 250, right?
No.
And he said, all right, because we were talking about delegation. When do you pass this off to somebody on your team so that you can get out of the way and stop being the bottleneck in your own company? Which I find for myself that I oftentimes am that bottleneck, right? I think it's a common problem among entrepreneurs. And I thought it was a really good question. He said, so if there's a task that comes up in your day, ask yourself, is this task going to make me $250 an hour? And if it's not, look at that as a task you might need to delegate to someone else. If it's going to make you that money or more, then yeah, maybe you can take that on yourself and start there. And I was like, wow, perspective,
Yep.
perspective. So I think you've kind of nailed that. The other thing that I was happy to hear you say was trial and error. Those words come up over and over again. I think the successful people that we've had on this show, and I'm never going to knock, go to college, get a degree, do this. All those things are great. But
Yep.
I have found that most successful people that I've spoken to, the real business lessons in their life didn't come from theoretical book knowledge. It came from trial and error, school of hard knocks. It's like you can learn stuff in a book, and that's why I say that's great, and that might give you a good foundation. But until you go face it in the real world, you don't really know until you're there.
Wow, I'm really glad you mentioned that because I did want to jump and chime in on that. That
Sure.
to me, so growing our e-commerce business from an idea and growing it to 7 figures was I've learned more doing that than I did going to school. And why that's important is I was in the trenches and I was then able to look at how that all the activities that I was doing was generating revenue and then profit. And I was able to see at a very detailed level about how all this worked. And so I learned more about growing a business in the last handful of years, let's say the last 5 years, than I have in my entire life. That I cannot put a price tag on. Again, I would agree with you. Going to college for some people is the right choice. I went to school. That was the path I chose. But again, I'm at a different point in life now. And I'm not knocking it one bit. There's some tremendous benefits from it. However, the benefits of the technology and what is available to us today, anybody can do this. And I mean anybody. And that to me, I love that about this because somebody who's determined enough is going to make it happen. And just to give your listeners another motivation is that because I'm on the M&A side, this is also what is motivating for me because I get to see behind the scenes these other businesses and see what they're doing right and what they're maybe missing out as well. But it's motivating as well because a lot of people that my so-called friends that are still in the traditional corporate world have said, you can't do that. I'm like, you have no idea. I'm in the trenches now doing M&A. We're doing deals all the time. And I can tell you things. And we have customers, by the way, all over the world. Like we have 2 clients right now in Dubai, one in Eastern Europe, one in South America. And so this is the example, but it's all the same. These are digital businesses. And so it's fascinating to see that anybody can do this from anywhere in the world.
I, I love that. Especially since COVID, we really learned that. I mean, this whole platform, this whole Meet the Experts web video series that we're doing right now, really was launched into existence through COVID because the very first episode was me and my buddy Mike Doyle, who we both worked from home. Um, And the first episode was how to effectively work from home now that you're forced to, right? And then from there it was like, wow, I can go to people wherever they are. Like you said, you get two in Dubai, one in Eastern Europe. You know, you got people all over the world, but now you can go, you can meet them in their living room from your office or from your living room, right? We're not confined to those boundaries of, oh, I got to get on a plane and go. I'd never get that client, I'd never even meet that person, if I had to. So I think that's I'm glad you spoke about that. I just got a couple more questions to wrap up, and this has been fun, Steve. I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm going to change gears on you a little bit here. Personally or professionally, I don't care which way you answer this, but tell us something that you're truly thankful for.
My wife, incredibly grateful for my wife, because without her, I wouldn't have had this opportunity to do this. We both have a passion for our health and providing, goodwill to the world where we can, with either our e-commerce business, wherever that's at, but just in general. And it's such a motivating factor for us because the freedom that we get from this business is so motivating. That to me is the underlying theme, right? And because we focus on leveraging the technology, like you just pointed out, we can deal with customers all over the world, and we just need an internet connection. And my wife, ironically, and I, prior to COVID happening, what we were doing is we had actually made the decision, just to also let your listeners know what's possible, is we're in our 50s. And we sold our house, we sold the cars, we sold everything, because we said, wait a minute, because we were traveling so much. In 2018, I'm like, we could do this full time. And then we get part of another group that people were doing that. I'm like, this is a lot of fun. We can do this. And we literally were traveling the world. So we sold everything. We moved to Mexico, ironically. We were living down there before, then the family called us back to the States, and then we've been back ever since. But our plan is actually to start traveling again, assuming the world lets us do that, because there's some unknowns right now with the filming of this podcast. But that is our plan. That's our long-term vision. But we can do this because the technology and the ability to create a business from an idea has never been more prevalent than it is today.
I agree 100%. My wife and I just had a very similar conversation. We have a 7-year-old though, so we're not really keen on the homeschool thing yet. So we're like, maybe we'll wait till she graduates high school, and then we're off, because we can do stuff from wherever we go. So
let me just add one comment to that.
Yeah,
just
sure.
to maybe give you some motivation. We have a good friend of ours right now, him and his husband and wife, and they have two children who are in their early teens right now, 12 and 14. They've been traveling the world homeschooling for the last 3 years, just so you know.
Wow. Yeah.
It's possible. So,
Oh, I know it's possible. I just do I have the what is it, the intestinal fortitude
right.
to make that leap at this point, and not quite, but
That's okay.
we've talked about it. We're like, what's holding us back? I mean, right now we have family on the East Coast, we're in the Southeast, and so that's, that keeps us from moving somewhere, but not necessarily moving around from place to place. So and now, I mean, travel, I'm traveling a lot more, and it would be great. But anyway, that's a different story for an episode that isn't yours. All right, I've got one last question. I always wrap up with this question. Every website that people visit for a business has a frequently asked questions section on it, right? I mean, it's par for the course. There are entire websites like Quora that all they do, it's a question and answer site. In the M&A advisory business, what is maybe the biggest question, maybe from a perspective like a business owner who you go to reach out to? What is the biggest roadblock or obstacle or question that you get asked that you have to overcome to help them know that you're the right person they should work with, or that they even need to think about merger and acquisition stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing that most people ask is, how much is my business worth? That's their top of mind question, right? Like, what's it worth? And there's some formulas that are in the marketplace that we will use actually to come up with some comparables. Think about this like real estate. There's comps for your house right now. It is very similar in the M&A space, whether it's a digital business or we're talking publicly traded companies. Now, the difference is, when you're a private small company that is doing the less than 10 million, less than even a half a million, even less than 3 to 5 million, right? You're going to be dealing with smaller businesses, which are asset sales. This is why I can do this, because these are all assets. So a website is an asset, and a digital business is an asset, right?
Mm.
And so you're going to sell all those assets to someone else if you choose to get to that point. But people typically ask, what's my business worth? And then we go through some conversations, basically what's your revenue and what's your profit, or in this case, it's called seller discretionary earnings versus EBITDA. That's just another way to say these smaller assets. So it's SDE, that's S for Sam, D for David, E for Echo. Seller discretionary earnings is what your business is spitting out in cash at the end of the year after you paid all your expenses, you paid yourself. What is left over, like any other business, right? At that point, what is my business worth? Now, if you're paying yourself, that gets counted as an add back because the new buyer might say, well, I don't want to pay myself, or I'm going to pay whatever that's going to be, because they might roll your business in. And that gets way off topic here. But that's the number one question. So we have to kind of walk them through that. And a lot of times it's painful because, like I said earlier, is that a lot of people say, I've worked really hard, and I'm not discounting how much they've worked and cried and sweat and teared and everything, and it's worth this. And the reality is the financials are the core foundation. Now you might get some other what's the term I'm looking for, some other benefits to pull that valuation up, but at the end of the day, the financials are the foundation, and that's what we need to get to. And then there's a multiple from that, and it's kind of based from there is the starting point, and that becomes sometimes it's always an eye-opening conversation, but a lot of times it becomes a very painful for the seller because they said, I've worked so hard, but then they're thinking about it as an employee mindset, like, I've worked these hours, I should get paid this. It's like, it doesn't work that way. And
Mhm.
when you're building a business, it's what is the asset you've produced or created generating in cash flow, because that's what a buyer is looking for.
Oh, I said that was the last question, but something you said, I have to piggyback on it before we go, because every Tuesday morning I'm on a Zoom call, of course, with a couple of other agency owners, and that we all do a little bit different things, but we talk about our wins this week and our challenges, and it's kind of like a little Tuesday morning coffee group, right, amongst business owners, and we'll bounce things off each other and help each other out. I made the comment this morning, and you're talking about assets in a digital business. I made a comment this morning that I believe that a list of past customers, prospects, contact information on people, data, that businesses can be entirely bought and sold based on what they have in a list in addition to their financials. Like, somebody might see a list of 20,000 local moms that are 48 and say, wow, that's worth a lot to me to get that list and permission. How do you feel about customer lists or past customer list as an asset that's worth something? And the example I'm going to give you is Bed Bath and Beyond closed down all their physical stores, but
Yep.
they have this millions of people list, and then Overstock came in, I guess it was, and bought it, and it's now an e-com company.
Yep.
But they had the list. So what do you feel about customer lists or customer data, and owning that data as an asset for your digital business?
Wow, I'm so glad you asked that question, because the short answer is yes, it is an asset of the business. Now, here's the mistake that business owners will make, right? Whether it's a local business, like you just talked about Bed Bath and Beyond, right? They have a list of assets that they're going to have your email, they're going to have your name, maybe your phone number, right? That is an asset that you can sell 100%. So that is worth something. So either you sell the entire business, and that's going to be a piece, another asset inside the major asset, or you can sell as a standalone asset, and then a buyer will come in and value it based on the revenue it's producing. Now, here's the mistake a lot of business owners make, right? Because I will ask them this question as we come in, we're doing this M&A work. It's like, how big is your list? It's 10,000, it's 20,000, it's 100,000, it's 150,000. Great, love it. Do you ever segment the list, meaning buyers and subscribers? Most people will say yes, even better, right? Then the next question is, what is that list producing for you in revenue? And do you measure it?
Mm.
And guess what
Mm.
the answer is?
Yeah,
They have no idea.
no idea. Yeah, yeah.
So if they
Interesting.
can answer that, that becomes, yes, it is worth an asset. And I will tell you right now, that's the number one mistake that business owners make, that when we're looking to sell these assets, they're leaving tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million+ on the table, and they don't realize it. And it's painful for me to see this. I'm like, you have this asset in your business but why aren't you? And you'll hear the phrase many times over, the money's in the list, the money's in the list. That's right, but it's not really that right. The real answer is the money is in the relationship you have with that list. Because if you don't communicate with that list, they don't know who you are.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. So glad you said that. That is a perfect way to end. I've been preaching that to clients for a long time. I do say the money's in the list, but I do believe that when we say that, we're talking about emailing, texting, communicating with that list and keeping it valuable, not letting
Sure.
it go stale. So thank you so much. Steve, listen, this was fun, man. I appreciate it. I think you and I probably need to set up another conversation, you and I, but if you're watching this or listening to this, go to skrpmedia.com/meet the experts. Put hyphens in there, just as it's the bottom. If you have a digital business, you're doing less than 10 million a year, right? And maybe you're just thinking about how do I go to the next level, or what is that ultimate exit sales, thing for me? And you just have these questions. I urge you, reach out to Steve. The site is coming back up, and it always goes opposite from which my hand goes. skrpmedia.com/meet-the-experts. He just made that link for us right before we started today. Go reach out to Steve. Steve, thanks so much for being a guest.
Shay, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope your listeners get some value out of it.
Absolutely. Stick around backstage for a minute. I'll be joining you in just a minute, but thanks again for coming on. That was awesome. What a great guy to talk to. Very knowledgeable. Definitely some nuggets were shared in there. So I can't wait for our 100th episode, which is coming up soon. Actually, let me pull this off and I'll put up the next thing. Our 100th episode should be here by the end of the year. And I'm going to go live, and I am pulling sound bites and clips from some of my favorites. And I'm sure that there's a nugget or two in there that's going to make that cut for the 100th episode. Stay tuned for that. We're going to start working on pulling those, going back and into the archives and pulling out all the good stuff from the last 3 years, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because if you go back and you watch the first couple episodes, oh gosh, they were bad. Takes a while. This might still be bad, but I feel like we've gotten a little better over time. I did promise that if you stuck around to the end of this episode, I would tell you how you can be a guest on Meet the Experts. Costs you nothing. Love to have the conversation. Sure, if you need help after that with editing the videos or promoting it, we've got packages for that. But we would love to have you on so you can talk about your business, your products, your services, and all the things that you're thankful for and everything else. MeetTheExpertsPodcast.com. That's Meet the Experts with an S podcast.com. Head over there, read all about it, right? Fill out the form, go through that, and hopefully, and you'll book your sound check that day. That'll be the first chance we'll get to meet and talk and make sure there's a great fit. Just go to meettheexpertspodcast.com and apply today. I say apply as if there's some rigid application process. Just fill out the form and click submit. That easy. And until our next episode coming up, Jay Vix with Meet the Experts, JVI Mobile, and Journey Builder CRM. And we'll talk to you very, very soon. Take care, everyone.